Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Conversations in Pop Culture, where I have with me Tyler James, who is the co founder and publisher from ComixTribe, as well as the founder of ComixLaunch, which is a hyper focused training program to help people launch successful comics on Kickstarter. And you've done a lot of that, and you have a bunch of students. So, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to talk all things comics, pop culture, etc.
Yeah, I'm super excited too because I see a bunch of your Facebook ads all over. If you go into one of these independent comic groups, you're gonna get targeted. I'm just giving everybody a fair warning. So just throwing that out there. But before we dive into all of that, I do want to talk about some of your other work, Comics Tribe related, because I think it's fascinating. Because you got the Red 10, C is for Cthulhu, Oxymoron, Epic, and people are probably hearing about Comics Tribe for the first time. So, what is that company and how did it exactly form? Because it's been around for about 10 years now.
Yeah, hard to believe it, but we'll be coming up soon on our 10th anniversary in January next year. Yeah, we kicked off in 2010, on January 1st, 2010. So the start of a new decade, saw the start of a new publishing company, and it's kind of interesting looking back. Sort of the ethos of Comics Tribe when we started, and it was myself and an editor, and he became our sort of editor in chief, Stephen Forbes. But we were both sort of comic creators ourselves, as well as have sort of an education by heart, or in my case, by background, and just loved sort of diving deep into the making of independent comics, and then sharing what we've learned about it. And so one of the things that we sort of decided from the very beginning with Comics Tribe was that hey, we had this vision for to make our own comics and to break into the world of small press publishing, and we were just going to share the journey and what worked and what didn't, and the strategies that we took, and the obstacles that we faced along the way. And so before we had a single book published under the Comics Tribe name, we started sort of sharing what we knew about making comics, and then what had learned about publishing them. And so fast forward 10 years, Comics Tribe has done over $500,000 in funding on Kickstarter. We've had printed hundreds and hundreds of thousands of books and distributed them worldwide. Have publishing deals on Diamond, and we sell books on Amazon, and have had some books translated into foreign languages, and we've sort of been documenting that journey all along the way. I caught the podcasting bug around 2015, and so prior to that, most of how I was sharing my work was via the blog at Comics Tribe, but then really saw that there were a lot of sources out there, a lot of great resources for making comics, but what you do once you got the thing made and how you actually build an audience for it and effectively launch to that audience was something that I got really passionate about, and decided that when I got into the podcasting game, that was really going to be the focus. And so that really started the ComixLaunch podcast. And so over the past decade, I've written and published a number of series myself. I've also worked with some phenomenally talented creators to publish their creator-owned work, and I do this full time. And in addition to the work and the things that I create and I publish, I also do work with creators and coach creators to help them bring their dream projects to life on Kickstarter and beyond. So it's been quite a journey. But I love what I do, and I kind of feel blessed, given the turmoil and things in the world right now, to be able to do what I do, and have it continue to go on, during this difficult time. So I'm humbly blessed every single day that I get to wake up and do what I love.
And let's talk a little bit about that because we're going to save the comics launch stuff for sort of the back end because that is beyond fascinating. And I think it's much needed right now because things are changing in the world very rapidly. But I do want to talk about how you were documenting your journey because one of the things that's out there is for the mainstream comics, the DC, Marvel, maybe even a Dark Horse, is that there are all these books on how to write a comic and publish a comic and kind of go the mainstream route. But I don't think that dating back to 2010, 2009, there was much documentation on the indie side. Because
Yeah.
indie comics to me really weren't a thing till 5, 6 years ago. They were always a thing, but they weren't as big as they were, I should say. So, what was that like, sharing all that information and providing a lot of insight? Because you probably save people hours, if not hundreds of hours, of fucking up, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's weird. Every generation sort of builds upon the one before it, and for me, my conception of indie comics was actually, the Image revolution, when Image burst onto the scene, and five of the top talents from Marvel and DC broke off to do their own thing. I'm excited to watch that new Todd McFarlane documentary, because I'm sure in it they'll be talking about some of the old days and everything. But I was about 13, 14 years old when Image broke out and did its thing, or when I like discovered them at a comic shop one day. And I think there was something that triggered in me the idea, because prior to Image Comics, I would read Spider-Man, I would read Batman, I would read Superman, but these were like things like the Eiffel Tower or the Empire State Building or the New York Yankees. They always existed. They were just there.
They were the establishment, is a good way to put it.
Right, right. But also, it was just like that was how the world worked. And there was also this thing that irked, because there wasn't this thing called the internet back then. And so, with Spider-Man on issue 300 or whatever, 298 or whatever, there was no way I was ever going to read all of Spider-Man. But then out of nowhere came this brand new universe with some of the top talent out there. And it was like, wait, I can get in on the ground floor of this thing when it's new, when it's hot, when it's fresh. And that's really what Image did for me. And then the other thing that sort of triggered me is like, oh, wait a minute, Spider-Man, Batman, Superman, these things didn't just always exist. They were actually created by human beings that dreamed them up. And that got me more interested in the creators and the creative side of it. And before you knew it, I was like, well, hey, if they can do it, why can't I? And that sort of got me, going from general comic fan to indie comic fan to indie comic creator. So by the time high school was done, I had done about 3 or 4 different series, or a couple hundred pages of comics, all self-taught. Just the Stan Lee book from the 70s on how to make comics the Marvel way was really main guide, and there was so much I didn't know. But so as I continue to go through this, like my documenting the journey and sharing what I was learning, what I was picking up and what was working for me, was sort of always something that I got a lot of passion out, and it did help us connect with creators in this industry. It was fun to go to conventions and have people come up to me and be like, hey man, that article you wrote about comic book barcodes, I have that bookmarked on my computer. I check it. I use it every single time I go to make a new series. Like it's cool for people to find resources that you created and connect that way.
And then fast forward, company is starting up. One of the first books out there was The Red 10. We were speaking about superheroes, and this is kind of superheroes flipped upside on its head and with real consequences. And basically, and correct me if I'm wrong, superhero kind of gets killed, and then her team or her former team of 10 people unite and basically are trying to get justice. And every issue, one of them dies for a particular reason, not to give too much away. So that kind of flips it upside its head, and a lot of shit's going on in this.
Yeah, that's that was my reaction to sort of it was my stab at the mainstream comics reliance on killing off a character. They need a sales boost. Let's kill off Spider-Man, Aquaman, Superman, whoever, to boost some sales. And it was happening so prevalently, and it was like Marvel and DC, or sort of one funeral after another, back and forth. I sort of like, one of these days they're just going to make a declaration that that a character in our universe dies in every single issue that we put out from here on out. And then I'm thoughting, well, how would I do that? And then it's sort of, I dove a little bit deeper into that idea, sort of almost as a lark, and then really dove back into sort of some of the classic island murder mysteries and whodunits. And so I'm like, what if we did a big cast, play with the archetypes, give them all dark, twisted versions, of characters, make sure everyone has a secret, and that while they seem familiar, every one of these characters, is not your mama's, Superman, and just play with that. And so we did some fun things in the series, like just that I'd never seen before. So yeah, a character dies in every single issue. We tell you that up front. The question is, what are they being? What's the dark secret that they are hiding? That's the reason for them to be killed, and who's actually doing it? Because and so the goal is to keep people guessing until the very end, and have a lot of fun with it. So yeah, so that was a series that I was working on, and it was this nice confluence of, I had that series that I was working on. Stephen brought in a young cracking young talent by the name of John Lees, who was an editing client of his, and he had this awesome another superhero book called The Standard, which is like a superhero another version of a superhero deconstruction. And then Joseph Mulvey was working on a book called Scam, which is another sort of genre twist on superheroes, which is about sort of like Ocean's 11 meets the X-Men. And so those are the sort of like the initial 3 series from 3 different creative teams that were like, okay, this is going to be the flagship launch for ComixTribe. And there was something powerful that happened, like that first New York Comic Con, where Joe, myself, and John, all the way from Scotland, sort of met up in New York City for the first time and never met each other, but we were all there sort of under the small, at that time we were just like little dinky spot and small press, but under the ComixTribe banner, and we're just starting to sell comics, and magic just started happening. And it's sad because this is going to be the first year since then that we won't be at New York Comic Con this year because of obviously what's going on with the pandemic. But yeah, it's been that was really the kickoff to it, and it's been a lot of fun.
And we're going to table that thought for 1 second, because I do want to talk more about the Red 10, because what I like about this book, and I'm halfway through, I actually found it because of Free Comic Book Day, which is a whole different discussion. Might be one of the only people who actually has that issue. Thought it was a
50,000 copies were printed, so I hope you're not the only one that has it. Although I'm sold out, to be honest. I haven't had a copy in years.
So what I like about it, what I was saying before, was that this is very much questioning what is justice, what is a hero, what is a villain, what does it mean to right or wrong, what are people really like? Is all these questions being thrown out there? I mean, we have these heroes who have secrets, and well, they're pretty interesting secrets, for lack of a better word here. And there's a lot of twists and turns, and it's not what you expect. And we also get character development throughout this entire thing, even though in issue 1, one of the characters dies, and then the other 9 in issue 2 have to deal with it, and so on and so forth. And well, in issue 10, we kind of get massive character development. And what I find is that mainstream doesn't do that. Well, and you were saying it, where every issue, sooner or later, somebody's going to die. And when they killed off Batman, for instance, and I hate to pick on Batman because I'm a Batman fan, but Batman fought through time to get back, and that was great character development. Then they had a complete relaunch, and all that was sort of erased. And so what was that all like? Really questioning that. And I think you answered part of it, but really hits a point for me, and it's different, and I like that Indie does that more efficiently right now.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm a comics fan. I'm a fan of characters, right? But um, I am more interested in the creators that are making it. I will, when it comes to directors or writers in film, or when we're talking about comics, like, there's something special about, a point of view from the character, and so when you combine a great talent and a great team, with a great character, magic tends to happen. But then when they leave, if it's taken over by someone who is not at the same caliber or is just going for a different vibe, and that's all right. That might be, one person's favorite run of Batman might be not someone else's cup of tea. But what is nice about the indie world is you get to see that vision from start to the end. And so this was, and the end, like the epilogue of the Red 10 was, a not too subtle nod, or not too subtle, like, jab at the world of comics and mainstream. But no, there will not be a Red 11. I've had some people ask. There will be more from the Oxymoron character, and there has been more from the Oxymoron character. But yeah, it was really meant to be, one complete statement, and you can get that in indie comics, and sometimes it's significantly longer. I mean, like, we look at the work Robert Kirkman done on not just one but two series. Like, Marvel and DC haven't been able to put together those kind of runs, same creative teams in consecutive issues with a coherent vision start to finish, as Kirkman's done with both Invincible and Walking Dead. But you also look at, Todd McFarlane, who we mentioned, still cranking out Spawn, and there's plenty of examples of creators, and I work with a lot of creators that have sort of been able to serialize and put books out and keep a series going, with the support of Kickstarter and beyond. So it is an exciting time to be a creator and to have a unique vision that you want to put out.
And you mentioned Oxymoron, because Oxymoron spun out of Red 10. And
Yeah.
Oxymoron is a lot of fun. Just as a character, I like the villains more. I'm a wrestling fan. Heels are way more fun than baby faces.
Yeah.
And so, what was that like? Because I don't know if you wrote on Oxymoron or you contributed, but I know that you created Oxymoron, and I know that you were very much the editor on that. And what was that like to continue this
Yeah.
series to some degree? It's not an exact continuation. I don't know the word for it, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. So, it's been an interesting journey with Oxymoron, and the so when I conceived of the Red 10, it's sort of one of those weird things where it's like, all right, here's the high, like, that was a high concept driven thing. It doesn't always happen. Sometimes you start with a character, and it's like, all right, we're going to build a story from a character, or you start with a situation. This was basically, here's the high concept. I'm killing characters in every issue. It's going to be a murder mystery. All right, now I got to build it out. And so what I needed to start doing was build out a cast of characters. And I used this sort of fun online challenge thing that I created, which is called the 30 Characters Challenge. So this is something I created, back in, I don't even know, 15 years ago now. Time flies. But basically, I put out to the internet, hey, create one character a day, every day for the month of November. And first year, there was about me and 20 other people did it. Second year was me and like 50 other people. Third year, over 1,000 people entered, which is pretty awesome. And so what I used that 30 characters challenge to flesh out characters for the Red 10, and one of the characters that I knew I needed was sort of your Joker archetype. Hey, this is the person that killed the murder, and that did or is presumed to have done the murder that is the inciting incident. And so I knew because our one character was going to be a Batman vigilante archetype, I knew our foil needed to be a sort of Joker analog or something that would evoke that, but needed to have its own sort of shtick, its own thing. And so the concept of the oxymoron, which is contradiction, and a character obsessed with and a villain or a supervillain that's obsessed with contradiction, and such that if you were a hypocrite, he was your target, and it wouldn't matter if you were a cop who is crooked, or a gangster with a heart of gold. Like, both of you would fall to his ethos, right? And it was just a lot of fun, right? But I made there was a retailer who was sort of the first person to stock the Red 10, and he got the first issue, read the first issue, and is like, you made a stupid mistake, because by the end of the first issue of the Red 10, spoiler alert, the oxymoron character is dead. And he's like, dude, you just killed off your cash cow. And I'm like, no. It was just like things. But then at New York Comic Con that first year, we made up some artist edition covers. And so I'm just sitting there like drawing, and I'm like, yeah, I'll do an oxymoron. Like I did, one of the other characters, put him down. The thing sat there. I did an oxymoron cover, quick one. He's got very easy design, fun design. Put it on the table, sold. $30. Did another one. Put it next to the other character, sold. So like 4 or 5 of these things with this character that nobody had ever heard of, but the visual appeal just, right off the bat, like, gotta have that. And so I'm like, oh, I got to do more with this character. So what I decided to do, because I was still working, and at this time, I'm working a 9 to 5, and I'm building ComixTribe on the side, so in the 5 to 9 range, right? And so I decided that I didn't have the bandwidth to write multiple series at once, above and beyond what else I was doing, sort of in publishing capacity for ComixTribe. But I did love this concept of a serial killer obsessed with contradiction. And so what I did was, I'm like, you know what? Let's do an anthology of this. I'm going to use this as an opportunity to expand the ComixTribe footprint a little bit, and to give some gigs and some jobs to some of the creators that I've had the pleasure to meet at conventions, online, and forums, etc. And so I reached out to about 20 creators, about 10 artists, 10 writers. And I said, hey, DC is not knocking down your door yet to write Joker, but I've got this character. Here's a little Bible about him. All of your stories need to be oxymorons. The title needs to be an oxymoron, and just give me your best 8-pager with this character, and go for it. The scripts came in; they were awesome. The art started coming in; it was awesome, and that ended up being the very first Kickstarter that I launched. That Kickstarter had an $8,000 goal, which was scary for me at the time.
A little high for the first one, I would say.
Yeah, and especially considering, at that time it was 2012. The first 4 Kickstarter campaigns I backed all failed miserably. A lot of campaigns were failing to get traction. I was pretty confident I could get, with the size of my audience and the quality of it, and I had started building up an email list at that time, and we had started to get a little traction, and we had some fans and people that were buying the Red 10. I was pretty sure I could get about half there, and I was thinking, what, with the 20 other creators that were involved and their networks and their audiences, maybe we'll get the other half. And we ended up doing $26,000 for that very first launch, which was significantly more than ComixTribe had made in the entire previous 2 years, even getting some books into shops and doing conventions and other things, and it just dramatically changed the game for us, because for the first time ever, we had a big chunk of cash in the bank. And yes, a lot of that was allocated to the Kickstarter and everything, but there's just something that happens when you have some cash flow and you've got some options and some other things. It usually goes the opposite. Usually the creators and the are the last to get paid down the line after you've paid all your expenses and all your shipping costs and all that other stuff. And so that was sort of a game changer for us. And we were able to just keep rolling with that and level things up from there.
And also, while this was all going on, you got this Kickstarter happening. You're in Diamond with the Red 10, and
we technically so prior to the Kickstarter, we sort of used the Kickstarter to also help leverage what was going to be the big launch in Diamond as well. So yeah, it was a couple things that were all sort of coming together at once, and that really became one of the things that I've been teaching and been advocating, is that you take any one revenue or income stream in the world of comics, and it's tough. It's tough to make it, but when you start combining them strategically, if you can if you can combine a Kickstarter campaign and then sell through the direct market, and also have a network of retailers that you do special work with, and then get your book selling on Amazon as well, like starts to, and then when you're going to conventions, your product is already paid for, and you've got some cool high-end collectibles and swag. All of a sudden, this game becomes a little bit easier and a lot more fun.
Yeah, and I quickly want to mention the Epic, because I like the Epic very much on the first two issues that I read.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of the funniest things I've ever read in my life.
I appreciate
And just to give what it's about, is that accidentally, because it's completely different than the Red 10 and Oxymoron, where this is definitely kid friendly, by far. So boy pretty much gets superpowers by accident. Something goes wrong, and he's in Miami, and Miami has a bunch of bikinis. Hot girls are in Miami, and his weakness is legitimately hot girls. And I just think it's completely out of this world. I think it's funny. The monsters in it and the supernatural things he faces are just weird and bizarre, and it's very easy to digest. And especially if you read the Red 10 and then you read that after.
Yeah, and they were both written by me. Yeah, I was working on those two series actually at the same time, and it was like one was a palate cleanser for the other. But yeah, I absolutely loved working on that book. Unfortunately, we only made it 3 issues. We got a little bit into the 4th issue, and the artist, Fico Ossio, who was actually the second artist, I co-created Epic with a creator named Matt Zollman. And Matt worked on most of the first issue. But yeah, FICO ended up getting snatched up by IDW and has had steady work from them doing a Spider-Man book, they're doing their Spider-Man Marvel team up book. There a lot of Transformers work. He just did a big series, I think for Dark Horse as well. But anyway, after sort of having 2 artists come and go on that, and then other things sort of taking off, and Epic, absolutely loved it, but just wasn't, it was a tougher sell, I think, for some reason, just compared to the other books and the hooks, and sometimes darker material sells a little bit easier and than the comedy. But man, I loved writing that book. Like my wife would make fun of me because I'd be sitting here like typing and laughing to myself as I did certain turns of phrases and stuff, or in the script. But yeah, I absolutely love that book.
And the reason why I bring up these 3 books is because in many ways, especially the Red 10 and Oxymoron and a little bit of Epic, they sort of are staples of ComixTribe and everything that's been put out there, especially early on. And
yeah.
I think that in many ways they established you and kind of put stakes in the ground to build your home, for lack of a better word, or your base. And one of the things that these 3 books had is they had some cool covers attached to them. They had artist editions, as you stated, and Epic had a gold cover, which I think is awesome. It also had a silver cover and like all shiny and stuff, and there was some other cool exclusive stuff going on. So what was that like, even have all of that in there? Because variants are awesome, and there's a market for that. And for those who don't know, a few days ago, Travis Gibb was on, and he was talking about exclusives and Comic Elite and things like that, and how people love exclusive stuff at comics in particular. So I'm just curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I grew up and came up and was a collector when a lot of the publishers were just pushing innovations, right? Image came in and just changed the way that comics were colored and printed, used higher stock paper, raised the price a little bit. Then Marvel and DC came back with different kinds of foil covers and chromium covers, and people just really pushing the envelope in terms of what you could do with the print medium. And I was a sucker for all that stuff, and I love that. I love that stuff. And it's for me now as a publisher, and I work with a lot of creators in addition to the stuff that my own stuff that I want to put out. Like, part of what keeps this game fresh for me is like, all right, how can we push the envelope? How can we do something? How can we add some production value, some sizzle?
What can we do next?
Right. And so, like, I mean, this is the last thing that we did. And this book just came in the other day. This is a hardcover. It's called She. The design that Chris Panda, who's the artist on this one, is a book with Ryan K. Lindsay. As I was sort of reviewing their pages and seeing what they were doing with it, this character just had a really cool sort of translucent mask here. You can probably see it down here. So like when the mask came on, so you could still see her face, but it had this awesome skull like logo over it. And so I'm like, what if we try to get that effect, that 3D effect on the hardcover itself? And so this is actually a die cut. You can actually play this fun game, which is always great for the social media images afterwards. Everybody can be it. But you can see, like, we've got this vellum page here, and you can see underneath it, right? And so
very cool. Cyborg 009 did something very similar.
Yeah, and so, like, I know this is a book that's just going to jump off the convention table, if there are ever conventions again. But for me, part of the thing that keeps it interesting is just like, all right, what haven't we tried? What can we do next? How can we add some polish? And that, again, comes back to Kickstarter. There's no way just the direct market and selling to the direct market at 60% off the cover price, and then having to have your cover price, compete with the cover prices of the other publishers. Like, there's no way you could afford to do that and not just lose a ton of money unless you were independently wealthy. But with Kickstarter, it's like, if we can dream it, we don't need massive amount of people to make it happen. 700 people made that book happen. And for those people that are going to get it, like, it's going to be one of the coolest books they've ever put on their shelves. So that's the kind of stuff that fires me up, and it always has. And so, yeah, when we did Epic, we like, let's play with some foils. With Wailing Blade, we've been playing, and the Red 10 launches that we just did, we played with some sort of metallic covers, and just I'm going to keep pushing the envelope, and I like working with print partners that I can go to and be like, hey, we want to do something cool. What's next? And I had on my podcast the other day Jim Rugg, that just did this really awesome translucent or fluorescent ink for a Kickstarter that absolutely crushed.
It's a cool Kickstarter for those who didn't know about it. It was very cool what he was.
Yeah. So I just love where we're at, and the technology that's out there and is it's pretty cool. So yeah, I'm all about pushing the envelope and making cool stuff. That's kind of what I'm in the game for at this point.
And now let's talk about Kickstarter, because I could talk to you about publishing and stuff, but I think everybody wants to know about Kickstarter because you're Mr. Kickstarter in many ways. And so,
go ahead. What's the question?
And so I'm just curious how you initially got into Kickstarter. I know you mentioned it briefly and how the first 4 that you actually backed failed miserably, and then you had an $8,000 Kickstarter. But when did you even get into Kickstarter? When did you discover it? And what was the environment like? Because I think people, especially in the last 3 years, don't understand what Kickstarter was like in 2010 versus in 2020.
Yeah, and especially for comics Kickstarter. In 2010 and 2011, it's a completely different platform at that time. And a lot of the conventions, a lot of things like stretch goals or, some of these techniques and things that people, we've seen it, we've done it, we know, we come to expect it, like, they just didn't exist. And a lot of times, like, creators had that problem of like, hey, if I ask too much, I won't get it, and I won't get anything. If I ask too little, I'll get it, and then that's all I'll get. And there was all these sort of misconceptions about that stuff. There was also sort of like, is this charity? Is this, am I like? And creators were like, felt like they were a hobo putting their hand out for loose change, and there was sort of like some negative connotations to it, and I think a lot of incredulousness in the community, right? Because like, gotta understand, like there was a tweet, Rick Remender, image writer and a very popular writer of a number of stuff. He said, in my day we had something like Kickstarter. It was called the high interest credit card, and and the idea that Kickstarter would just work and that you could raise thousands of dollars as an independent creator was kind of like, prior to that, it was like, no, you would need to go to 5 shows and hope to do that and you'd have to leave your house and spend all your time and do all of that stuff. And so like, there's just a lot of surprise that Kickstarter actually worked, I think. And for me too. And I remember like before, one thing that I didn't get before I really dove into it is like, why would I give I thought, why would I give Kickstarter 10% when I can just, run a pre-order thing on my own website, right? And I did, I actually did for a webcomic that I had done. This was pre-ComixTribe. I ran like a little crowdfunding thing. I raised $500 for a 100 copy print run that I ran with a PayPal button and a month-long campaign on my own webcomic site. So that one did $500, and I was actually thrilled at that point because I didn't see the point of Kickstarter. But as it evolved, like Kickstarter it created this really central hub with a smooth experience for backers that made it very, very easy for backers to just jump in and support. And it made it very easy for people to come in, whether they're just at the very small level and want to just throw a token support to you, all the way up to super premium tiers. We have a backer that's backed the last 5 ComixTribe Kickstarter campaigns at whatever the highest level we put it.
Have you bought him a beer yet? Or her? Have you bought him a beer yet? Him or her?
I mean, we send him all kinds of stuff all the time because he's awesome, and we've actually met him at a couple conventions and everything. Great guy. He's been featured in a number of our books because he's bought some tiers to have placement. But just the idea that there are people like that out there would have been mind blowing to most creators prior to Kickstarter. So if you rewind the clock, I was somewhat skeptical of it, but I had started to see some projects pop. I saw what Jason Brubaker did with one of his early launches. I saw the Sullivan Sluggers Kickstarter, which was at the time the best Kickstarter that had ever been run. Turns out there were some mistakes that creator has admitted making, and things like some big mistakes that showed that it doesn't matter how much money you actually raise on Kickstarter. If the fundamentals of your campaign are off, it can actually really set you back or put you in a really tough spot. But yeah, I studied the best of what was out there and tried to run the best the best launch that Kickstarter had ever seen. That was sort of my goal, compiling the best of what I'd seen, not even just from comics, but some of the other categories that were starting to do cool things, such as the games categories and other things. And so I did my research, put into action, and then, because at the time I was doing a lot of blogging over at the ComixTribe site, I started sharing my articles about it. And here's these strategies. And I quickly noticed that the articles that got the most traction, the most shares, the most engagement were Kickstarter related. And so when I decided I wanted to get into the podcasting game, I also realized that one of the things that I had been doing even before starting the Comixlaunch podcast is I sort of went on this journey of realizing that some of our books, like And Then Emily Was Gone, and then Oxymoron, and then Sync, some of our books were starting to get the critical praise and acclaim um, that was far outseating what they were selling in the direct market and beyond. And the only person whose fault that is the person with the publisher title on it, right? The publisher's job is to move books. And I realized I was sort of doing a disservice to my crew by not moving more darn books. And so I really dove into the marketing side of things. Like, how do we make our launches bigger? How do we make our audience bigger? How do we sell more in the direct market? How do we start using some of the modern tools that often a lot of comic creators don't bother ever learning or paying attention to? And I got really into it. I got really into the world of marketing and promoting comics, and put out a lot of resources on that on ComixTribe. And then when I decided, you know what, like, I'm really into this podcasting thing, I want to give that a shot. I also recognized the power of niching down, because at this point I had already, it took, I think it took us like 4 or 5 years to build up, like, a 5,000 person email list for ComixTribe. I was able to, build 5,000 people in a few months for the Seeds for Cthulhu brand. And part of the reason for that is because we were able to hyper narrow and focus. Knew exactly who it was we were targeting with these Lovecraft themed children's books. And so that brand sort of took off. And so I was able to, apply more strategies and things like that with that brand. And then feed that back into the other stuff. And so I wanted to, if I was going to get in the podcasting game, I wanted to have a niche that I could really go in laser focused on and legitimately say, hey, we are the number 1 podcast in the world for X, Y, and Z. And in our case, X, Y, and Z became crowdfunding comics on Kickstarter. And so started podcasting on a weekly basis, and somehow, some way, it's been 260 plus weeks in a row that we put out an episode.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because personally, this is what I think is going on with Kickstarter and everything, and a lot of changes have occurred from 2010 to 2020. And one of the biggest changes, and I'm just curious, and I still think there's opportunity, is that we now have a lot more big players coming in. And even on Indiegogo, and I know that's not exactly Kickstarter, I don't get why it's political. I think that's bullshit. I really think nobody has explained it to me why it's political.
Because that's a good way to make money. By picking a fight, and by making it us versus them, and by saying, hey, we were banned by Kickstarter, so you got to support us over here. That has been wildly effective at rallying a small corner of the internet to spend a lot of money. So like that's why that is the case. It does crack me up, though, that like the most common response I will get when I put out posts or ads is Kickstarter sucks, Indiegogo, blah 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 blah. Like, it's political. And I sometimes I will engage with these people, and that is one of my favorite pastimes, is just delightfully engaging with people that will be nasty to me, and respond with uber respectability to people that just want to fight on the internet, is one of my favorite things. But yeah, it's I mean, it works in terms of getting people to toe the party line, if that's the game. But I don't want to get there. Like, I honestly, I love that Indiegogo exists. I have creators in my community that use it, or use it in addition to Kickstarter. I'm glad there's competition. I'm glad, like, there's a reason it's called the ComixLaunch podcast and not the Kickstarter podcast, because Kickstarter is, a portion of what I teach and a portion of what I preach. But if Kickstarter went away, my podcast wouldn't go away. I would still be.
So going off of that point, obviously a lot of money is being raised in crowdfunding in general. Kickstarter's killing it with, Todd McFarlane, Ryan Brown and Charles Soule just did their curse words, and that did really well. And there's a variety, everybody from somebody doing $2,500 to doing $120,000 is happening in the
Yeah.
Kickstarter world, up to million plus. And there's going to be, in the next 5 years, $1 million campaigns, without a doubt, happening in the comic world, whether it's from big guys or small guys. So there's obviously a lot of opportunity. So what is your service exactly? Because I do want to talk about that, because I think it's more prevalent now than ever. Cons are shit, and they're not coming back so quickly, and people aren't coming back so quickly. And well, I think everybody's learning that e-commerce is the way to go.
Yeah. 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 So, ComixLaunch podcast is there to help you learn the mindset, strategies, and tactics that work on Kickstarter and beyond. It's a combination of shows, and it's available for free on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you listen, so you can check it out. Just search ComixLaunch with an X. It's a combination of trainings that I teach. I do interviews with creators, big and small, and everything in between. And I also have some other certain episodes that I've done that are fun, where like sometimes I'll bring on a creator and just coach them on a specific issue. Might be Kickstarter related, it might be just general creative related. But what I found is that as podcasts are great, and tips are great, and blog posts are great, it's not education, right? My background is in education. I have a master's degree in education. There's nothing that I read in my graduate studies at Harvard that I could not have gone to a public library or the internet and found that article or that thing.
For 35 cents in late fees.
Exactly. I just wouldn't have done it, is the thing. And what I've found is that when I started ComixLaunch, more than half of all the comic projects that we're launching were failing. And so something wasn't getting through. And it wasn't, and a lot of times I would get people that like, hey, Tyler, why is this campaign losing? This book looks amazing. Or why is that campaign crushing? I don't see the appeal. And so as an educator and as someone with a real passion for this, I sort of realized that, well, there is a process that I've run through. Like, as someone that launched and launched again and launched again and launched for different properties and different categories on Kickstarter and for different brands and different styles, I stopped recreating the wheel and just followed a process for each of the sort of brands and the things that I've done. And the process worked, and it worked very well for me. And I didn't see anyone out there really teaching a coherent process. And then the other thing is that I've always found that following a system, doing it in the context of other creators who are trying to learn the same system and have similar goals and are trying to do that, and then also having a coach or a guide or an instructor that I could ask the tough questions to, or I could get feedback from, or I could run ideas by. Like, that's how I've learned best throughout my life, right? When I actually leveled up, it wasn't just going things all on my own, and that's usually been the slow way, and everything. And so I sort of had this idea that, like, hey, maybe there would be creators in my community, and at the time, I think I had for ComixLaunch anyway, there's probably only like 80 creators that were on our email list. But I said, hey, I'm thinking about teaching a course that will I've got room for about 8 creators. We'll go step by step through the process of planning, launching, funding, and fulfilling your Kickstarter campaign. Anyone interested? And I had about 20 replies, and ultimately 8 creators signed on for that first cohort of what became the ComixLaunch course. And so that's really what I've been doing since 2016. Is I've been taking creators through my process, been teaching them my process, and then connecting them with other creators that are building Kickstarter audiences, launching them on Kickstarter, and then taking the next step, which is, okay, we've got this Kickstarter thing funded. What's next, Tyler? How do I get it distributed into different channels, or how do I get my own online shop selling, or how do I continue to build my audience and grow my email list, because the surest way to know that, or the surest way to ensure that your next launch is bigger than your last one, is to increase the number of people that you can reach with sending an email, or reach by putting out a message. And so I've sort of built out the systems that I've learned to run ComixTribe on in a step-by-step framework that that I make available to other creators. They can go through that at their own pace. But then we also get together a couple times a month and we do focused coaching sessions where I answer questions, or we look at latest strategies. I teach what I'm doing now in my business, what I'm learning, tools I'm using, resources. And then there's also a private Facebook community just of creators that have invested in this program and are learning this program, or serious in this program, building their audiences, and also looking for other serious creators that are doing the same thing for networking, for cross promotion, for Kickstarter cross promotion, etc. And as a result, like, we've got some great results. You know, the Kickstarter overall average success rate for all projects on Kickstarter is about 38%, 39%, depending upon the month. Comics is a little higher. Comics is the only category that has grown in terms of overall success rate every year since I've been doing this. Every other category is flat or has declined a little bit, which is something cool about the comics platform. But our creators are launching at about a 95% success rate, and everyone that's launched and did not have a successful launch has retooled, revamped, relaunched, and had a successful launch. So yeah, we're keeping doing it. Our members have raised over $1.3 million Kickstarter at this point, and yeah, it's fun. It's a lot of fun.
And so what does that mean for you? Because it's not only you're running a successful project, you're also getting a lot of stuff out there. And I don't want to say you're gunning for the big guys, but indie comics is, and it's slowly coming. I mean, if you don't see the writing on the wall, I mean, I've seen the writing on the wall. That's why I kind of started this entire podcast and doing a lot of indie creators, with occasionally a wrestler and a voice actor thrown in there just for my own personal entertainment.
Yeah,
But
your show, man, you call the shots.
I see the writing on the wall where I think in 10 years from now, Hollywood is going to be pulling out of the indies versus out of the big guys. And given that stuff is funding on Kickstarter, and that you have such a high success rate, and that you've raised with everybody that you've coached and in your group over $1 million in all their projects, what is that like? Because that's clearly sort of the start of Revolution 2.0 in many ways.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of fun, and we have creators that we attract a lot of transmedia creators and creators that do have aspirations for taking their stuff into other directions. What's also nice about our program is, like, you know, my role is not to direct or to, you know, or to control your success. I am, you know, like, in terms for ComixTribe, yes, I do have stake in all of those in those things that we launch under the ComixTribe banner. For ComixLaunch, my job is, you know, I'm Yoda and I'm handing out the lightsabers, but you guys are all the creators there. Like, they're taking our framework and they're the champion, they're the hero, they're getting it done, and they control all of their destiny. So so yeah, I do agree with you. You're going to see a lot of these sort of you know, somewhat obscure titles come out of nowhere and connect. And the nice thing about Kickstarter is there's a scoreboard that can't be denied, right? And so, like, it's very hard. Like, one of the hardest. Like nobody wants you until everybody wants you, right? But when you can have a successful launch, and sometimes these things build over time. You know, there's a creator in my who's in my community. His first launch 3 years ago did $100 or a little over $100, but he saw that was just the beginning, right? That was just a training. Well, I'm using this to learn the platform. I'm going to build from that. His next launch did better. His next launch did better. His next launch did better. His last launch did over $50,000 for his latest issue of a series that he's been serializing, and he's been able to sort of transition from working a job he didn't love to full-time creator in a lot less time than than I was able to make that transition for darn sure. And that's part of the goal. Like one of my ethos is like, yes, as a creator, you're going to make some mistakes. You're going to have to learn some hard lessons, but you don't need to learn them all, and you don't need to make all those mistakes yourself. Other people have made them for you, and there is a roadmap. There is a fast lane. There is a path that is proven. So you could do it on your own, kind of, or come join us and join a network and join a community, and we'll show you the path and we'll help you get there. And so I'm thankful that there's a lot of creators that trust me with that. I'm humbled by it. And one of the nicest things about this whole COVID thing is that we've had a lot more creators join, and the engagement has been through the roof in our coaching sessions and other things. And I think like people really need that at this point when we're having very little like in-person social interaction, a lot of us, because of all the distancing and everything. And so, the fact that I'm able to bring together creators in such a fashion is pretty, love what I do.
And to go to the future, obviously things are changing. I believe that indies are going to be pulled out of in 10 years from now, if not sooner. But as far as Kickstarter, because Kickstarter, I think really in 2015 is where it started to evolve. In my opinion, it's become what it is today. And I'm curious where you think it's going and where you think crowdfunding is going with all this stuff and the technology and what is being done with print. Because there is a big issue now between print and digital and that entire war. But also there's massive technology, and we're starting to see for the first time that since Diamond shut down a bunch of stores, all these comic shops needed product. They needed new product. And it was an opportunity for certain indie people to get in, as well as a bunch of backstock to move out, as well as a bunch of comic Kickstarters sort of happened in July that shouldn't have happened. And that's the fallacy of July, is kind of 2020. And I think everybody knows July is a shit month for Kickstarter due to San Diego Comic-Con for the most part.
Yeah, it's been interesting. We saw with the initial hit of COVID, like a massive drop overall site-wide for projects on Kickstarter. Comics were no exception. There's probably a 30% drop in comics projects, and then it dipped a little bit. But I checked at the beginning of this month, there were roughly what you would expect the total number of projects to be back to sort of normal on Kickstarter. And I predict that by the end of this year, like Kickstarter will have an all-time high in terms of number of projects live on any given time, simply because, as you said, the convention season is canceled. And so we see creators, big names and small names as alike, hey, this is the option. This is the market that's still open. And the success rate for comic projects on Kickstarter kept going up all throughout COVID. And we had probably a dozen creators over the past 3 or 4 months that had their best launches ever in our community on Kickstarter during these tough times. And so, yeah, I agree with you. Like, you're going to see more people going on there. I think I am not a more competition is bad person. Like, I actually I want to see more bigger names join Kickstarter because. And I would see some creators give some flack to like Todd McFarlane. Or what does he need to kick? He's a millionaire. He's got the Barry Bonds balls or whatever. What does he need to go on Kickstarter for? Like, what they were missing was the fact that his campaign brought in like thousands and thousands of first-time backers that now have their credit card on file on Kickstarter, that are now getting emails of similar projects from Kickstarter, that are now far more likely to take a chance on your cool project than they were prior to Todd jumping in. And so I say bring them all on. But that also does mean that, you got to bring your A game on Kickstarter. Like, no question about it, because more projects does mean more competition, does mean more projects vying for the limited top spots on the Kickstarter platform to get showcased and to get pushed out into people's feeds and notifications and things. And so that's, it's never been more important that you really do your homework and come correct with a launch.
And your product is sort of perfect for that. So where can people find your product? What can they look up? How can they listen to the podcast for starters? Because I think the free version of that podcast is a great place to start. And then how can they get on the pro version?
Yeah, I'll give 3 quick things that'll all be easy to remember. Obviously, if you're listening to this on a podcast, the easiest thing that you can do is just find ComixLaunch on wherever you listen to podcasts. That's COMIX launch. But I'd also, if you're a comic creator and you're trying to figure out this Kickstarter thing, you're trying to see what, all right, what the steps are, what do I have entail. I did put together a free resource. It's available at comixlaunch.com/roadmap. And it's a quick guide that shares sort of the steps to going from idea to funded projects. It's loaded with some tips, and it will get you sort of onto the ComixLaunch email list, where we'll continue to send you invitation. We'll continue to send you some resources, and we'll when we have open enrollment again for ComixLaunch Pro, you'll be notified about that. And then the last thing is, if you're on Facebook and you do the Facebook groups thing, I've created this year, which is new, just a free Facebook group for comic book creator crowdfunders. So you have to be a comic book creator, you have to be a crowdfunder or a soon-to-be crowdfunder, or we won't let you in. But if you want in on that, it's at comixlaunch.com/group, and that's a little Facebook group, and we'll send you more inspiration, ideas, tips, etc. there.
And to go even further, you have ComixTribe, and there's a bunch of stuff on sale there. There's a bunch of books. It's a great place to buy. I like buying directly from people versus buying Amazon or B&N or others. So what's on your site exactly? Because there's some single issues, there's some book stuff, there's a few artist editions still left.
If you go to shop.comixtribe.com, you can find some of our latest series. We're actually just finishing up the fulfillment for She. So you won't be able to find this there yet, but we'll be doing a big sort of launch or relaunch with some of our copies that we have left over and some of the cool swag and things that we've got. We'll be doing a little launch on the site coming up soon. And then I also would be remiss not to plug it, but tomorrow, you caught me on a Kickstarter Eve night. We are launching a new summer, Christmas in July-ish launch for the Seas for Cthulhu brand. We've got some Santa Cthulhu's, some Seas for Cthulhu wrapping paper, and a new version of Twas the Night Before Seas for Cthulhu Christmas coming out. So that'll be the latest launch for the Seas for Cthulhu brand as well. So I'm excited about that. That's good. So you know what? As one of the reasons that I'm able to keep teaching this stuff and keeping my skills fresh, is that I'm an active user of the platform itself. This will be the 20th launch that I've overseen, and just blessed to be able to keep having that platform be a platform that if you use it right, if you use it well, if you treat your backers right, it's a renewable resource, and one that can help continue to grow and flourish for years and years to come. And so if you've been sitting on the sidelines, jump on in. The water's fine, and ComixLaunch will help you do that.
And I do want to also give you a chance to plug some social media. I think you plugged ComixLaunch, but what about ComixTribe? Because I don't think, where can people find that on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram?
Yeah, we're at ComixTribe on Facebook and Twitter. We connect with us there. We also have a Facebook group and an insiders group. So if you jump on and check out any of our ComixTribe stuff, those feeds, we're happy to have you in the tribe as well.
Well, I think that's a perfect place to stop. And I've been saying it all along to everybody in every one of these things. Obviously you got ComixTribe, but you are still very much indie, and you're out there hustling, doing all those Kickstarters. And so if you have extra money during COVID, we might be getting another $1,200 check, still up in the air, but just fingers crossed, everybody, which means you can go buy more comics. Consider throwing a portion of that at indie if you have that excess money and you don't need to take care of your family. And if you don't and you're using that money to take care of your family, I really recommend following people on social media. It's free. It means a lot. Liking something, just don't be a troll. If you see those ads, don't start a fight, guys. It gets old. We're all in this together. But seriously, on a more serious note, though, unless you don't have electricity or internet, if you don't, please call me because I will find a way to help you. Because first off, I would love to know how you're watching this without electricity or internet. And then secondly, clearly you need my help more than you need to support me or Tyler in this circumstance. I want to make that clear. But again, in all seriousness, support on social media, it means just as much as throwing money at somebody's book. Getting on somebody's email list is so crucial, and it's free, and you never know what you're going to discover in that email. It could very well change your entire trajectory, and we've all been there.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it really is a blessing that the people that make work that we respect are just a few clicks away. Like that, let's not take that for granted. And as you said, with the trolls, let's not abuse it either, right?
Couldn't have said it better myself.